Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk about the Courtyard House. And it's not just about interiors, it's how we moved this house from a 1960s model to a present-day house that works for a family. We've been asked to talk about why it is the way it is. And before I start to talk about that, I'd like to introduce you to how the courtyard has worked in residential architecture over time. And I think the first examples were found in prehistoric Israel. And here we have beautiful courtyards laid out with landscape and working beautifully for the families. These properties were worked in grid-light streets, and thankfully the courtyard became their only open spaces. Following that, about 1000 BC, I've been doing my homework, I found these examples of the Sahuyan, which is the Chinese model found in Beijing. And again, the courtyard was used in these houses for dust protection from wind, control of climate, and to provide spaces for these families to enjoy nature. An example of the Santa de Burro in Portugal has, in 1997, been revitalised as a hotel. Now, this building was built in the 12th century, and the new landscape that they've introduced has revitalised the space for today's living. A very beautiful building. We all know Villa Savoy in the outskirts of Paris, one of Corbusier's most important buildings. And here, he and his cousin, Pierre Généré, decided they would put a courtyard at level 1. And so they surrounded the courtyard with living spaces and then slotted the last wall to frame views, and when the windows were open, to provide breezes. We've already seen this one, but Roy Ground's such an important architect in Melbourne, and as Greg has already outlined, an incredible circular courtyard in a perfect rectangle and designed to capture warmth in summer and control the breezes. Capture the warmth in winter and control the breezes in summer. Another wonderful example of courtyards is, of course, from Louis Barragan in Mexico. His amazing use of colour, of texture, of composition. It says everything about Mexican culture. An incredible example, again, of courtyards. Then when I started looking at modern-day Japan, there were courtyards everywhere. And I'll just quickly go through this wonderful example of Shigeru-ban. And as you can see, they've all got that beautiful Japanese feel and work so well as a central space in residential design. And just a couple of Australian models that attracted me. Hang on, I'll have to just check which one this is, sorry. The Chencha Little House in Sydney, and the Chencha Little House in Sydney is this one, and the OPAT architects produced this one just outside Melbourne. What I found also interesting, that this development in South Bank, the Triptych development, of which we were lucky enough to be involved in the master planning and the interiors, the developers asked for 3-storey vertical courtyards, all naturally ventilated, to provide community spaces. Amazing that our new residential developments are now introducing courtyard living for their inhabitants. And now on to the courtyard house. As you can see, an old picture taken in 1960 when the courtyard was first built by Harry Ernest in Melbourne. It's in a great location, tiny cul-de-sac opposite the Yarra River and beautifully leafy. Here are some of the early photographs of the west entry with the carport and very clever protection of an open circular mesh, giving west sun control to the spaces. The courtyard as we found it, some of the views from the sitting areas out to the courtyard, and corridors on the south side. What we did is we clambered on the roof and we thought, what would it be like? What sort of views would we have if we, as the client had asked us to do, to build an additional space at first floor level. So that was the east view, and as you can see, there's an incredible opportunity with surrounding vegetation. And then here are the views looking west to the city. And you can't see the city at the moment, but certainly when we completed this and in winter, it can be seen. So it was really a fabulous opportunity. 15 months, crazy construction, we all know what that's about. But finally, as you can see, we completed the project in late 2007. The plan was retained as the original courtyard of 1960. And the courtyard was the reason behind choosing the property. The north and south walls were retained, the slab was retained, and the two nib walls were retained, which was quite an important part of our environmental policy to keep as much as we could. But we set up the job to borrow the landscape beyond. That was the most important part, by opening up the house to borrow the landscape and also to set up very strong axes. The first floor, which was built as a rectangular hovering container over the courtyard, houses the master bed suite, the dressing room and the ensuite. And this area facing due west with absolutely no control of the west sun, was protected with bespoke louvered shutters in perforated steel. These were electrically operated so they could shut down and control the views, the vistas and the climate. The view of the entry. On the north wall, as you can see on the left-hand side, was a strong element to conceal the car park from the arrival zone. On the right-hand side of the image, you can see the west garden, which was very simply landscaped in grasses and Japanese maple. And this opened into the living space. But importantly, the steps led you through to the central courtyard and to the landscape beyond. So wherever you were in this property, the landscape was very dominant. This crazy door. We had an opening, because the nib walls remained, of 4.3 metres wide by 2.6 metres high, and there was no way we wanted to break that up. And so we went about constructing this aluminium-clad door, which I think was the biggest door that we'd ever handled in that proportion, 4.3 metres wide and 2.6 metres high. But what it did is it allowed the arrival on the courtyard to predominate. And here is the metal door and how it almost unfolds the space as anybody arrives. The fireplace at the end is perfect shape and is there. It's a real fire, and it's there to ensure that when the courtyard is not functioning, at least in winter, there is a very strong focus in the house. The sitting area, the dining area, and the kitchen beyond. What was important to us also was that we had this continuous plinth running the full 22 metres length of this particular wing. It allowed us to add joinery. We had a hearth, and we had a sitting area in the sitting area, in the sitting place in the sitting area. A stainless steel kitchen led to the courtyard and provided all the control that we've found over time in the earlier houses. It was a refuge from a busy life. It controlled the breezes, and it brought in the winter warmth as it faced north. The stair leading to the upper level, the bespoke solid surface vanities with full-length mirrors that hover over the garden below, and a much more luxurious and soft bedroom environment, and you can see here where the louvers actually span that space. So here it is, the final result. We were very fortunate to win the Best House National Award, and environmentally it stacked up incredibly well also, with its control of the sun, the elements, using natural ventilation and doing all the things that a courtyard should do. And I know this has been done before, but I can't help but introduce it again. The wonderful BHP, or what was BHP House at 140 William Street, designed by Barry Patton. The reason why I've included it is because I think as we work in this building today, it is absolutely extraordinary that it is still so relevant to today's workplace theory. Columnless floor plates and incredible elevation and views over Melbourne. It just absolutely amazes us as a company when we work in this space. Thank you very much.